but if you can take me back to the very earliest first surfboard you ever had, describe it, what it was, and work your way through your collection of surfboards in your mind as far as you want to come till today.
Well, the first board I had, the first board we surfed was a board left by, it was during the war. It was in 1944 when I first went to Malibu, 45, and it was still the war. And this vet left a heavy redwood board behind the wall at Malibu. And Corny and I didn't have a board. We'd hitch a ride up to Malibu. So Corny and I would take this board out, and it was a horrible clunker. It was heavy, not a good board. And I think it took me 4 weeks to get into a wave, and then it took me another 3 weeks to not pearl. And by the time I finally got a wave and stood up, it was maybe the whole summer, you know. It was a total disaster. So then this guy that lived next to Buzzy had a semi-hollow board that Simmons had reshaped. And I bought it from the guy for $25. And that was my first board. And that was just like, I mean, after being on this redwood clinker behind the wall, you know, and getting on that board, it was reasonably light. It was, for those days, it was maybe 50 pounds, 55, 60 pounds. And it was a reasonably shaped board, and it had a fin, and it was a good board. It just made a world of difference. And then I got my concave from Simmons, balsa fiberglass concave from Simmons that I rode for 10 years, and it was a really good board. My brother, I was competing in this was 1949, I was competing and swimming in the outdoor nationals and outdoor swim meets during the summer. And I was at the LA Swim Stadium competing, and I come home, and my board, I look at my board, and it's in two halves. It's two pieces. It's the concave. And Corny had borrowed it without asking and taken it up to Malibu and went through the Malibu Pier with it. It was a big day at Malibu. Went through the Malibu Pier, almost killed himself and broke the board in half. And so Simmons said he could fix it. So Simmons, when you got Simmons to build a board or fix a board, it was the whole year was wasted because he was so slow at getting the board out for you. But it took him a long time to fix the board. But what he did is he put mahogany strips in. So the board added about 10 pounds towards the nose. So it wasn't real good on small waves, but it was really good on bigger waves. And it because of the extra weight, it got into waves fairly easy, and it seemed to be better almost with that extra weight for bigger waves. And I rode that board for 10 years, and it was the only board I rode, and I loved that board. Most guys go through a board, they have 20 boards, you know, they have this board for that surf and that board for that surf. I always had the idea, the plan that I would ride one board. And then when I came to Hawaii, I had a Joe Quigg 10.6 that was a balsa fiberglass board that was really good, that I rode from 58 when I got it. I bought it. He built it for Tony Steller, who was from Stanford, and he was over for Thanksgiving. And when he left, he sold me the board, and I had it from that time on. And that board I rode until it broke in half at Waimea. And then I got this Brewer 11.4 gun that was real good at Waimea and terrible at Sunset. And then I had a board that Greg Noah made for me for Sunset that was real good. So I had all these boards. And then I finally realized that Waimea, a board for Waimea was not a board for Sunset, and a board for Sunset was not a board for Waimea. So I finally wised up and surfed two boards, one for Waimea and one for Sunset. And it made a big difference because I tried to ride that 11.4 gun at Sunset, and trying to make turns on that thing at the bottom it was like turning a battleship, you know. So probably in the last few years, I had Bradshaw made me a board I really liked. I surfed that for a long time. But at the end, I started getting boards from Bushman. And Bushman made me some really good boards. And what I liked, he didn't put a lot of rocker in the boards. Owl made me boards that had a lot of rocker. They were good, but they had too much rocker. Willis, these guys would make me boards and then not charge me, so that was a good deal. And I had these, but they had so much rocker that when you started to get into the wave, it was mushy. Where the boards I got, Nellis made me a real good board. It had no rocker, and these boards at the end didn't have the rocker. They could get into the wave so much easier, and they were so much better for getting into the wave. And to me, that's the hard part of surfing is the paddling in. And I found out that those boards were the last ones I surfed, and they were good boards. So I've got a lot of those boards down in the boardroom, and I've got hundreds of boards in the boardroom there that are classic. I got a board from Mike Eaton that was real good. So over the years, I've had some good boards.
Did you ever go through any shortboard phase at all?
No, I've never been able to surf a shortboard. The shortest board I ever surfed was 9.6, and Jeff Hackman had this guy, Gallagher or something, his name was Callahan, that made him a board, and Jeff was so good at Sunset, This was after Jeff was out of high school. And would Jeff be around your time? Was he in the same class as you? Were you? Year ahead of you. You were 68 then, and he was 67. Well, Jeff had this board, and he wrote it real well, and so I ordered a board from him, this Callahan. It was 9.6, and it was just too small. So that was the smallest board I ever rode, and it was just too small for me, and I just went back to my 10-foot. I would get, for small waves like camis and pupake and everything, I had a Barry Kanapuni made me these longboards, the nose walking longboards that were good, and they were always around 10 feet. And I'd ride those in the summer. And then for Sunset, I'd ride a semi gun that Bushman would make, or that Kenny. I call those semi guns in the sense that they weren't real Waimea type guns, and so they.
Were these always single fin boards, or
always single fin, and always yellow. I'm so nearsighted. Before I started wearing the lens, towards the end I was wearing the lens out in the lineup. It was just made a world of difference. I could see people. I knew who I was surfing with. I could see the waves. It was like night and day. But before I had the lens, I was so nearsighted. I had all my boards yellow, so that if I lost my board, I could see it. So I started surfing the yellow boards, and and I always had a white T-shirt and red trunks, and I was superstitious. If I picked the board up and I'd walk up to Sunset, I would hold the board in the right hand up to a certain point, and I'd have to shift it over to the left hand and carry it a ways, and then I had this ritual that I'd go through because I was superstitious. That way I'd have a good day, and if I didn't follow that ritual, I'd have a bad day. People are superstitious. I think Buzzy was pretty superstitious. And it's really funny to see. It's amazing. But I would go through a ritual for Waimea that was always the same. And I remember one day, it was Eno and her brothers we had the old house here, and we were fixing the roof. And they had this work day. So I took off from Punahou to do this work day and help them on the roof and everything. It was the best day of the winter. And I'm looking at this surf, and I just couldn't stand any longer. And I grabbed my board. I went down there, and they were all angry at me. The Gerards were totally angry, the family, because I kissed off the building of the roof, went surfing. But I was so hungry to get out there, I didn't go through my ritual. I paddle out, and the wave of the day comes, and Buzzy gets it, and where am I? I'm on the inside, and I swim. I didn't get a wave. Everything was a total disaster. I swam, I got caught inside. Buzzy got all these beautiful waves, and he that was wave that he got at Waimea that you see the picture of all the time, and we made a comedy sequence out of it where he's in fast motion at the end, and well, that was the wave that he got. Well, I'm inside pushing through, you know. So that was a horrible day, and it was because I didn't go through my normal ritual, you know. But it works, you know. It's amazing. Well, the first wave was probably at Sereno Beach in 1943-44 on a paddleboard going straight off that Kit and Buzzy pushed me into, maybe. You know, when they were trying to get me to corny surf. That was when I was maybe 13 or so, 14. But then my first wave was probably that redwood clunker in the back of the board when I finally stood up and rode it to the beach, which was a real event, you know. But probably the wave I remember the most was when I got a good board and started to ride well, you know, where I could make turns. And
on the Simmons.
It was on that semi-hollow that he shaped. Yeah.
Look at this camera. Real slowly say aloha.
Aloha. Well, I hope you got something on it.